What's good, my dudes, and welcome back to the driveway for a car review presented today by Mazda, where this week the company has dropped off what is easily the most upscale version yet of their modern day midsizer. So today we're going to get a look at and drive the 2018 Mazda 6 Signature. All right, boys and girls, so let's get to it. And you guys know what we got to do first, right? Got to breathe some life into this baby. Now, like I was saying, the 6 Signature now holds the title of being the most expensive and the most upscale version yet of Mazda's current day midsize sedan, with an as-tested price here of just over $36,000, which for that sort of money, you're putting yourself in the same price range as a fully loaded Honda Accord Touring, a very worthy competitor for this sporty midsizer. However, there's a little bit more riding on this new 6 than just that, because this car in particular houses the first turbocharged 4-cylinder application that Mazda has put in the 6 since the Mazda Speed6 came out all the way back in the mid-2000s. So this car is definitely some show and go at the same time. But we'll go ahead and open her up here. This car does have the advanced keyless access as standard equipment, which does include the 2 buttons on the front 2 door handles here. You can use either one of them to lock and or unlock the vehicle. Go ahead and slide on in here. Now, because the fact that this car is keyless, it works just like any other system out there. Just have the key fob anywhere in the vehicle and simply put your foot on the brake pedal and hit the button up here at the top of the dashboard, and now, in a world of fairly plebeian looking families today as that have come onto the market these days, Mazda seems to be the one that never wants to follow the crowd. And when you title your midsize family flagship as the Signature trim, of course you have to have things that can back up its over $36,000 price tag, and the looks certainly nail that to a T. I mean, just looking here at the front of the Signature trim, we have this bold gunmetal finish grille, nice and wide to feed all the air to that turbocharged 4-cylinder up front. We do have full LED headlights as standard equipment, and they have these beautiful automatic LED daytime running lights that go almost the entire inside of the headlight itself. These are fully adaptive, also as standard. And also, speaking of adaptive or active, here at the front of the 6, and also thanks to sensors at the top of the windshield, we have a full active safety suite, also as standard equipment. We have things such as forward collision alert with pedestrian detection, blind spot monitoring, and smart cruise control, just to name a few. Now, in terms of its overall size, at least in terms of length, this car is right up there with some of the bigger names in its class. It stretches about 193 inches from nose to tail, making it around the same size as a current generation Camry or Accord. However, the 6 loses out to both of those just a little bit, being the fact that it's about an inch or two narrower than both the Honda or the Toyota. Now, in terms of styling elements, one of my other favorite things with this Signature trim are these, the 19-inch gunmetal finished aluminum alloy wheels wrapped in Falcon ZX all-season tires. I love the way they look, and especially I love the way they contrast with things like this snowflake white mica exterior that my test car is wearing as well. We have an independent suspension here in the front and the rear, thus giving this car a much better handling characteristic than some of its competition, along with 4-wheel disc brakes all the way around. But in the case of the updated 6, we also have something that Mazda calls G-vectoring control, which is essentially fancy speak for a system that Mazda has developed to allow the 6 to handle even better than it ever has before. Now, as we continue on, I mentioned that this car has a very sculpted look to it, and this is all thanks to Mazda's Kodo design language, and things like the body lines here along the edge of the hood, how it just sort of flows over the wheel arch and here where this middle line meets the mirror, and then this second one which continues along the belt line all the way down towards the back. Just so many different swoops and curves that really catch your eye in all sorts of different ways. But in terms of features, the signature trim really isn't that much different than a lot of other loaded versions of similar vehicles in its class. For example, we do have body colored side view mirrors, as you would do, and you also have the applicable LED turn signals here on the outside. Now, these mirrors are fitted with your blind spot indication system indicators here in the upper corners. You also do have the rear cross traffic alert system that coincides with that as well, and also underneath, I mentioned before, you have a camera located underneath each mirror, and that coincides with the 360-degree around view monitor with the 4 cameras placed strategically around the vehicle. As you continue up top, you do have a standard size power tilting and sliding sunroof. Now, in a spirit of if it ain't broke, don't fix it, Mazda has continued the design that they first brought out back in 2014 with this mid-cycle refresh. So not only has the front received a change, but there are some changes that have gone on here at the back as well. Now, it does have a touch of sport to go with its luxury sculpted looks. You have this little lip spoiler here hanging off the rear trunk. You have full LED taillights here, so you have LED turn signals and full LED everything else. You do have the signature Sky Active badge here on the back, giving you a hint as to what lies up front under the hood. And you also do have other things such as your rear view camera hidden here just above the license plate, along with the 4 sensors that make up the rear half of the active parking assist system. Now, as you would expect, the Mazda 6 is still classified as a mid-size family sedan, and naturally, families usually have tendencies to carry a lot of stuff, so you need a place to put all of that, right? So, back here in the trunk, you open it up, and one of the things, at least to this set of eyes, that looks kind of apparent is that the trunk opening doesn't seem all that big. I mean, yes, you have over 14.5 cubic feet of space here in just the rear trunk section alone before you use these little pull tabs to fold down the rear 60/40 split fold seats, but just to me it seems a little bit on the small side. But then again, you don't necessarily need to have excessive amounts of space to put all your stuff in the back. Now, if we lift up the rear carpet here for just a second, you do have a compact spare tire and toolkit located here underneath. But overall, I would definitely say that the 6 is very much a class competitor when it comes to hauling your family stuff somewhere in a hurry. Now, if there's one area of Mazda's vehicles that I can always give them high marks for, regardless of which vehicle it is, it's when you step into their interiors. But here in this signature trim, it really does feel like Mazda has gone the extra mile. I mean, you have things like the suede brake here in the middle of the dash, a little bit of wood-esque trim over here on the passenger side, but here in the signature trim, we also have things such as the Napa-lined leather front seats here, and boy, are they comfy. And one little funny thing about this particular car that I have, although on camera the seats kind of look maybe black or slightly off black, they're actually a deep chestnut brown, and they coincide very well with the snowflake white exterior that my test car has today. Now, the other thing that I'm really liking about these interiors, aside from the way they look and feel, is the fact that I wouldn't exactly call this interior cluttered. I mean, yes, you have buttons for every single kind of convenience you could think of, whether it's here on the steering wheel, whether it's the 8-inch infotainment display at the top of the dash, or maybe even things like the automatic climate zone or all of the stuff down here in the center console. Now, in terms of creature comforts and gadgets, like I said, the signature trim offers you pretty much everything you could possibly want. Here on this beautiful leather trimmed 3-spoke multifunction steering wheel, we have things such as the hands-free radio controls. You have the info button here, which controls the thin film transistor display hidden up here in the center of your speedometer. You have hands-free Bluetooth, you have functions for the radar cruise control, and so on and so forth. To add a little bit of sporty nature, along with that turbocharged engine up front, we do have paddle shifters here on the back of the steering wheel. You can use those coinciding with the manual mode here on the shifter, and you also have a sport mode just to make those shifts feel, I don't know, a little bit more, I guess, aggressive, and we'll get to that here a little bit more in just a bit. Now, in terms of everything else, you do have some other stuff over here to the left of the steering wheel, and you do have buttons for your traction control, lane lane departure alert, and also your parking sensors, but you have one button here that allows you to look out of the front of the car at any given time. So you push the button labeled view with a little camera on it, and up here on the centralized display, sorry about the lines in there, that's just a trick of the camera, you do have the 360-degree around view monitor, but you also have the button that allows you to look through all of the cameras. So you can look at just the camera specifically, you can look out the corners of the vehicle, and so on and so forth. Now, looking at this gauge cluster here for just a second, first off, I love the way everything is laid out. I love how Mazda has revised things like the tachometer. The speedometer here in the middle is a full thin film transistor display that is fully adjustable, like I mentioned before. And of course, you have your other ubiquitous gauges over there on the right, including your engine temperature and your fuel level. But just to go through a couple of things here in that centralized display, I mentioned the info button here on the left-hand side of the steering wheel. You simply press it and you can control things such as your trip meter and average fuel economy. You have the sensor for the lane departure warning or lane keep assist, and you can keep on going here. You have your service intervals, and you also have functions for things like your navigation and your distance to empty. Now, although this 2018 Mazda 6 has been gone through with much more of a fine-tooth comb than ever before, there are still a couple of areas around this interior that feel like they just need a little bit more of an upgrade to bring this car right up into that much more luxurious status, even more so than it already is. And the big one for me revolves around this 8-inch display that they have up here. Now, it's not the display itself. I'm perfectly fine with it. It's right in my line of sight as I'm driving along, and I have no issues with that whatsoever. But it's things like the navigation that's going on right now. The graphics are, I guess, subpar. They're not exactly the greatest graphics that I've ever seen in a navigation system, especially for a car that's costing near on $40,000. So that really is something that I feel Mazda could update just a little bit. And really, it's the system as a whole. I mean, this 2018 model still houses basically an updated version of Mazda's Connect system that they've had in place since 2014. You do have things such as the Bluetooth media streaming, along with the Bose Centerpoint audio system, which we'll test here in just a moment. Your Bluetooth communication, that's pretty much a standard thing. And then you do have your navigation functions as well. And like I was saying earlier, all of these functions are controlled here through the centralized control station down here at the base of the center console. And it's just like all the other times before. You have your volume knob down here on the far right, you have your home button in the middle, you have your audio button over on the left, and the navigation button over here on the right. And of course, everything else is exactly as you would expect. You turn the wheel to the right, scrolls right, turn it to the left, it scrolls left, and then in order to select something, you simply push down on it and it selects whatever you're trying to get to. Now, I did mention that Bose Centerpoint audio system. Now, as you guys know from before, I am a music lover through and through. I like a good bit of bass in my music, but the clarity from this audio system is so on point, I can forgive any lack of bass or anything like that that you might hear with a surround sound system like this. So let me just turn on the stereo and show you what I mean when I say that this is one of the best audio systems that I've ever heard. Now, as you move on from that 8-inch touchscreen display, you move down here to the middle of the dash where you find the 6's automated dual zone climate control system. And while the display itself is rather thin, the controls themselves are so large that everything is, again, very legible, very easy to understand, and it doesn't take any time at all to figure anything out. On the outside of each side, we do have the 3-stage heated and ventilated seats, all standard equipment here on the signature Mazda 6. As you can see, I got my ventilated seat going right now because it is blistering hot already here in the Houston area. Speaking of hot, we do also have a heated steering wheel here for this signature trim as well, and everything else is pretty much as you'd expect. Inside of each of those temperature knobs, you also have your automatic function, as well as the ability to synchronize the temperatures at the same time as well. So using the driver's temperature knob, you can control both of the temperatures by themselves, or you can control them both at the same time. But you do have a couple of other things down here. You have a nice little storage cubby here just in front of the shifter. But one thing that's a bit of a letdown is this signature trim doesn't come with any form of wireless charging. You do have plenty of USB ports, most of which are hidden back here in the center console, but you don't have any form of a wireless charger up here, which a lot of the 6's competitors do offer, either as standard or at a very small additional charge. Now, as you move back from here, you do have the selector for the standard 6-speed Skyactiv G automatic transmission. I've been quite the fan of Mazda's automatics these days. These Skyactiv G transmissions offer the fuel efficiency of something like a CVT without the sort of rubber bandy kind of feel, but it also offers the quick shifting sporty nature of something like a dual clutch transmission at the same time. Now, you do have all the typical things: park, reverse, neutral, drive. You got the manual mode, as I mentioned before. You push up to go down a gear, pull back to go up a gear. Like I said, you do have the trigger over here, which is for your sport mode as well, so that heightens things like your shift timings, your throttle response, and so on. And I mentioned that when we were talking about the paddle shifters up here as well. You do also have the standard things like your backup camera here out of the back, and using that control station in the middle, you can move it into a split screen like you see here. So you have your rear view over on the left with your 360-degree around view monitor over here on the right. And again, you can just go right back to the normal camera if you so desire. As you move on down just a little bit further, there are a couple of other things besides the little control station back here behind the shifter. You do have the standard electronic parking brake here, and also the famous auto hold system. Now, a lot of people still don't understand the auto hold function, and very simply put, with the system active, you pull up to a stop sign, stoplight, whatever, come to a full stop with your foot on the brake pedal, and as soon as the car realizes that it's come to a complete stop with your foot still on the brake pedal, the auto hold engages. You can take your foot off the brake pedal and the car will stay exactly where it is until you put your foot on the accelerator, to which then the system deactivates and you can set off again. As you move back from all of the controls, however, moving on just a bit, we do have two moderately sized cup holders, although I wouldn't recommend putting your biggest fast food drinks in here. I've had two very large cups in here and they don't exactly seem to fit perfectly all the time. You do have a nice little cover to go over the top of that as well, in case you don't want to use the cup holders. You can just simply rest something right here as such. You do also have a small little center console back here. As I mentioned, you have two USB ports here in the back, along with an SD card reader. Now that is used mainly for your navigation, but you also do have one 12-volt 120 watt outlet back here as well. And you also do have an auxiliary import for something like maybe an older phone that doesn't use something like a USB. Now, before we move things along elsewhere, so many people have complained that in my reviews recently, I haven't demonstrated vehicle sunroofs very much. So to any of you out there who are wondering how the sunroof on this 2018 Mazda 6 operates, it's very simple, like all the others. You slide the shade back, one touch operation here with the little switch in the middle, and it moves back with relative ease. And you also do have a little wind guard up here, this kind of rigid piece along the top that protrudes up just a little bit to prevent that sort of fluttering noise that you get like when you open a window. Now, although being up in the front of this Mazda 6 is certainly not a bad place to spend your time, it's definitely not so bad being back here in the back either. To begin with, I'm not a small person. I'm 6'1", and I still have plenty of headroom here in the back, thanks to the generous indentation that Mazda has put here in the rear part of the headliner. And also, not to mention, I have quite a substantial amount of room for my legs as well. This driver's seat is exactly where I would have it if I was driving this vehicle. And as you can see, I still have quite a sizable distance here between my knees and the back of the driver's seat. We also have two leather-bound map pockets here hidden in the backs of each of the seats. And not to mention, we also do have a nice little storage compartment here in the back of the center console. You open it up, you have two USB charging ports here at the rear of this little storage area. You can store two phones in there with ease. And also, not to mention, this being the highest end trim of the Mazda 6 line, you have rear heated seats back here as well. And I'm actually liking the placement of these buttons. It's not something you would find maybe over there on the door. Instead, you have the nice silver trimmed buttons hidden lovingly here just behind the cup holders in the center console. Now, as I mentioned, these rear seats are also 60/40 split fold, and the triggers of which aren't up here on the upper edges of the seats. They're actually hidden in the trunk, which we saw earlier. All right, so now that we've seen all the beauty bits, now it's time to sample what Mazda has prided themselves on for years, and that is the driving experience. So, seatbelt on, engine start. All right, so we are on the road now in the new Mazda 6. And first impressions, this one is just like any other mid-sized family car that I've driven to date. It's very quiet, it's very comfortable, the visibility is excellent in here, and you can haul 4 to 5 sizable people without any worries. But that's not the highlight of this Mazda 6 signature. No, the big story with this car is what is up front, and that is because Mazda has fitted this car with the same engine that they've put in their 3-row crossover, the CX-9. It's a 2.5-liter turbocharged Skyactiv 4-cylinder engine that, once gas is applied, makes 227 horsepower, but a whopping 310 foot-pounds of torque. Now that's way more than either the Camry XSE V6 and the Accord 2-liter turbo. But really, the horsepower numbers with this car are only telling half the story on regular gas. If you run this thing on 93 octane, which is normally recommended for most turbocharged engines, you'll be getting 250 horsepower and the same 310 foot-pounds of torque. Now, unfortunately, me being my youthful self and having a bit of a heavy foot, even though this car is rated at 23 miles per gallon in the city and 31 miles per gallon on the highway, our average over a week of testing so far is 18.4 miles per gallon. Now, being that this is a mid-sized family car, of course it is rather spacious in here. Now, as I mentioned, this car is a slight bit narrower than both the Honda Accord and the Camry, but it doesn't exactly feel it. It doesn't feel very small inside this cabin. You still have plenty of space in here, and at 6'1", I'm not exactly small by any means, but I still do have plenty of room to maneuver around in here. I've got at least some pretty decent thigh support, and I do have a little bit of wiggle room up here across my torso as well, just a little bit of maneuverability from side to side. Now, Mazda has always prided themselves for building cars that have some go, they go with the show. So how well does that translate to this new 6? Well, let me just put this car in sport mode real quick. You hear the revs kind of rise a little bit, it kicks you down a gear. Put it over into manual, flick it down a couple notches, and let's see what happens. Now, as you can probably tell by my reaction, it's not exactly the head back in the seat kind of reaction, but at the same time, it's this surge of smooth, endless torque that just seems to come out of nowhere. And it takes you all the way up to about 6,000 to 6,500 revs before it changes gear again. And the thing that I've noticed about the Skyactiv engine, and specifically this Skyactiv transmission, is just how responsive they actually are. There's no lag from the turbo up front whatsoever in this car. And on top of that, as I was mentioning earlier, the Skyactiv G transmission has been kind of built to resemble the driving characteristics, not just so much of a standard torque converter automatic, but more so having the smoothness and efficiency of something like a CVT without the rubber bandy kind of performance, but at the same time having the quick reactive shifts of something like a dual clutch transmission as well. So in terms of handling, this car is not exactly a true sports sedan. The handling is a little bit numb on turn-in, and I've come to expect that with a lot of family cars these days. Even in sport mode, where the steering tightens up ever so slightly with this electric power steering system, it doesn't feel as quick or responsive as I guess I would have liked it to be. When you first turn in, there's a little bit of play in the wheel before the wheel actually kicks in and says, okay, I want to actually turn the car as well. So it takes a little bit of getting used to, I guess, but I would have expected maybe a little bit more responsiveness out of something as sporty as the Mazda 6. So at the end of it all, the question really remains, would one buy one? In the case of me personally, my answer is a resounding yes. I absolutely love this new Mazda 6, with just a couple of little caveats that sort of put a little worry in my mind. And the first one is, of course, the price tag. When you're buying a fully loaded mid-sized family car, whether it's the Accord, the Camry, the Hyundai Sonata, or this, you really are going to be paying a lot more than if you were buying something like, I don't know, the Sport or maybe the touring version of this car at the same time. As I said, the price tag on this one, just over 36 grand, which sounds like a wedge of money, but when you really compare it to maybe even some luxury offerings on the market, it starts to make a little bit more financial sense for the amount of stuff that you get as an entire package. But the other thing that worries me about this car are the warranties. The Mazda 6 comes with a 3-year, 36,000-mile bumper-to-bumper warranty and a 5-year, 60,000-mile powertrain warranty. Now, the main worry is that bumper-to-bumper warranty, because there's so much on this car that could, I don't know, potentially go wrong at some point. There's so many active safety features that could break at some point, and knowing you only have 3 years or 36,000 miles for those parts to start wearing out, I don't feel like that's enough time. So I think the warranty would have to be just a little bit longer on a car like this. Well, everyone, I do hope you've enjoyed this review and drive of the 2018 Mazda 6. And if you guys like this video, please do give it a thumbs up. And also be sure to click that subscribe button down below for many more videos like this and more to come in the future. But in the end, as always, a huge thanks goes out to the folks at Mazda USA for sending over this gorgeous snowflake white Mazda 6 Signature for us to have a go in for an entire week. But in the end, guys, I hope you enjoyed the review, and I will see y'all next time. Take care, everybody. Stay safe.